All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of your new favorite Old World podcast, Motley Crude. I'm Kevin. I'm glad to be here. I'm doing great. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing quite well, Ryan. Yeah.
Awesome. What about you?
I'm still recovering from Capital City bloodbath.
Yeah, I bet that was pretty wild there in terms of just how busy you and Chris and I think it was Max Dubois were just running around having everything going.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of work. A lot of getting ready and tear down and sort of trying to slot back into post-Capital City life. Now that I don't have this big project looming over my head getting ready for this, it's kind of finding the time to do normal stuff again.
Yeah, and now that you can spend your free time doing something other than painting a million tables worth of terrain.
Yeah, now I get to paint a Dark Elf army for SBot, so...
In Toronto. Nice. Good. So
Yep.
that's a really good segue into what we'll be talking about. So for episode 2, we're going to be doing an after-action review of CCBB, Capital City Bloodbath, the tournament we talked about in episode 1. So yeah, we're gonna start right away. We're going to kick off by just talking a bit about what's new in our hobby and just do a bit of a round table so everybody's brought up to speed on the other end. And after that, we'll dive into some news. And then finally, we'll be talking about CCBB in great detail and how that all went. So first of all, let's start with a bit of a round table. What's new in your hobby? What have you been doing, painting, playing, etc., aside from the tournament, obviously? Let's kick it off.
Okay, so I have been building Chaos Marauder Horsemen to do something that's not Bretonnian
Nice.
over the last couple days, and just playing a ridiculous amount of Baldur's Gate 3 to not think about Warhammer
Amazing.
for a few minutes. That's
great.
been my week.
Yeah,
Andrew?
I think we're. Oh, sorry. I think we're both pretty pumped about those that Marauder Army of Infamy, eh?
I have so much excitement for Toughness 3 unarmored infantry.
Exactly. I was talking to Andrew before the show, and it was like we're gonna have to see what the rules look like because exactly what you mentioned, Toughness 3 unarmored infantry is like a dangerous place to be.
Absolutely.
All right, Andrew, what about you?
I've been doing a bit of a palette cleanse. So I'm working on a Corpse Grinder Necromunda gang for a campaign that started, I guess a week ago here in Ottawa. Not Old World related, but I only have to paint 10 models, and then I plan to jump into finishing off my Dark Elf army, as I said before, for the SBot in Toronto. Hopefully
Nice.
I can get it mostly pretty close to done, if not all the main colors at least blocked in.
Nice. And I've seen the first few models that you put together there and painted, and I think they're looking sharp already. Going to be a really nice warband or team or whatever you call them in Necromunda. Gang, probably. Gang.
Yeah, gangs.
Awesome. And then on my end, so aside from the obvious with CCBB, I played a game online of Old World. Played into one of my buddies. Played Tomb Kings. It was a good game for the Chaos Dwarfs, a big win. So that was fun. I've also been started painting up my Mordheim warband. So we have a local buddy, Danny, who's setting up a Mordheim campaign. I've converted up an Amazon warband from the Blood Bowl team, and I've painted almost done painting the first 2 models of that. And then finally, I'm also been listening to Wolfspear, one of the Horus Heresy audiobooks, and my personal quest to finish all of the Horus Heresy books. I guess I'm most of the way through now, but still working on that. So so that's what we've been all doing. And before we get to CCBB, I think we definitely need to talk about some Old World news because there's been a lot going on online. So yeah, let's kick us off with a bit of what are our feelings about the upcoming Warriors of Chaos Arcane Journal?
Yeah, well, it's pretty cool how quickly off the heels of dwarves that they've announced this. It's been less than a month, I think, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's pretty exciting. Warriors was one of my original armies back in 8, so I am really interested to see how it pans out. Unfortunately, I guess there's no new models, although in um the almanac that they released today, they did say there would be a new model for the named character. I forget her name off the top of my head now, but it sounds like she's the one that's gonna slot into uh the Marauder themed list. So that's pretty cool. We'll see what the Arcane Journal's like though. I mean, Warriors are, I think, a decent army to begin with, so it's going to be interesting to see how
Oh,
an army that is, at least in my opinion, one of those better end armies, how will the Arcane Journal change how they play without making them even more powerful than they already are? But I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that pans out.
Yeah, for sure. And then on my end, I'm like you said, man, I'm super happy to see the pace of releases picking up a little bit. I think everybody got a little bit disheartened there while we were waiting for dwarves for what felt like 6 months. So the speed is great. I'm just pretty excited to see what the rules are like in the two armies of infamy. Especially the Marauders, I'm pumped for. Like I've told you guys a few times on the chat, Conan the Army is sounds amazing to me. We'll have to see what that sort of looks like. The models are also they're sort of hit or miss for me. Some of them I really like. Some of them are just a bit too much in the goofy era of Warhammer for my tastes. But your mileage may vary on that one. And yeah, so just excited to see sort of what comes out. And like you, I think um, I'm really hoping for alternate play styles rather than a power boost because I don't think that faction is what really needs a power boost right now. So yeah, that's sort of how I see it. What about you, Ryan?
so I haven't brought this up before, but I actually came into a great deal on Slaves to Darkness models a few months ago. So I have a large unbuilt pile of future Chaos Army that this Arcane Journal has me very excited for.
Nice.
And in that vein, as I said, we have Dark Oath Marauders, going to look great. But I'm very excited to see these two alternate armies. Marauder Army because I just think it's cool, and also the Cavalry Army because I'm curious what they're going to give it. Because right now you can already make an entirely Cavalry and Chariot Warriors of Chaos Grand Army. So they'll either have to create some new units or rules, and I guess we'll see tomorrow when they publish more articles about it. But they'll have to do something different, other than it just be you can take horses as core because you can already take horses as core. But I'm very excited because this was the army I was planning on next, so it kind of fell into my lap right around the time that I'm going to play Bretonians through SBOT Toronto, and then I'm probably going to switch to Chaos going into Christmas.
Nice. And then are you doing the most of the Marauders, like the new sculpts that GW's put out in the last, I don't know, year or so for AOS, or are you going for something a little bit more dated or whatever?
Everything is Slaves to Darkness or Dark Oath models from Age of Sigmar.
Nice.
My warriors, like the dragon is Yondis Cryptborn. It's
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, so I was kind of debating this if I end up going forward and making a sort of Marauder themed army. We'll have to see how many models are required because I agree with you that the new Dark Oath models are absolute kick ass, but I think they're probably going to be a bit of a pain to paint if there's 80 or 90 that I've got to go through. So I was kind of looking also at the Blood Reavers from the Blades of Corn range for AOS, which seem a little bit simpler and quicker to paint up for the base troop guys. But yeah,
I debated that or even there's a few kind of barbarian type models from lines like Deus Vault and Fireforge that I could go down as well. But I honestly I really don't like the early 2000s plastic Marauders.
Yeah, agreed. And like those
They're
are a non-starter
terrible.
for me too because the proportions on them they're so wonky. I don't think
Yeah.
they're okay.
Well, the
Yeah.
Cav ones aren't too bad.
Oh,
Uh,
the cavalry's fine.
but they were a late, like they didn't come out at the same time as like the OG Marauders. Like they were like a late 2000s, I think, kit. One thing interesting though about like the teaser today or the almanac is, I think you guys planning Marauder lists are also going to need to buy some Gores because it looks like it's a combined Beastmen and Marauder. At least based on the picture, they didn't actually come out and say that. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. But it
And
looks like
the narrative would support that too, because the story that they're telling in this whole article is about how the wolves of the sea are linking up with beastmen cults building shrines on the coast in the wasteland.
oh well, there you
Which, as
go.
an aside, I think they've done a really good job of linking this story into what we'll talk about in a little bit about the future releases,
Yeah.
because it was very easy for me to see how they're all going to tie together with this one story.
Absolutely. And like as far as I'm concerned, if you're forcing me to buy Gores and paint Gores, like that's one of the best things I could be arm twisted into because I love those models and I think Beastmen are amazing. So yeah. And then what about the news that was released last night? That sort of not roadmap show that we got out of, was it Nova? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a
So
little brutal.
yeah, that was yeah, that was interesting. I was expecting a little bit more out of that. I'm not gonna lie, like actual roadmaps and not whatever they gave us. But it is what it is. We did get like some cool info there. So the Empire's coming next. I think we've all heard sort of different things about those armies of infamy, and I keep circling back to armies of infamy because I just love the concept. But I think I heard like Nuln, or like an artillery themed list on the one hand, and then I'd heard Middenheim as another, which would sort of make sense in terms of the narrative that they're building from the Arcane Journal that they sort of Warriors of Chaos, but I guess the Wasteland makes more sense, but it's still sort of in the same sort of general northwestern end of the Empire, and then High Elves after, and then who knows what they're going to bring up with High Elves. Yeah, Ryan, what do you think of the news last night?
So, credit where credit's due, we got more of a roadmap than Horus Heresy did, where it just said, you get stuff.
Fair enough.
So, there's that. But honestly, Chaos rounding out the year works perfectly for me. Empire, High Elves, both interesting. I I've seen some rumblings of Marienburg versus Middenheim as the other army, which would again tie into the narrative better.
Yeah.
But as we were discussing earlier, I don't 100% know what a pre-independence Marienburg army would look like, other than Hive of Scum and Villainy, the faction. So
Fair
there's
enough.
that. And then High Elves, also very excited. Like High Elves is another army I'm very interested in because I just really like elves. And the talk of nautical characters, there's kind of two canonical entities that it could be, or it could be some random third thing. But I'm not
Yeah.
going to turn down a Sea Guard army
Sure. You're
either.
talking about Finnebar and who else?
I forget his name. He came up in a discussion earlier, but there is also a named character who, when Finnebar became the Phoenix King,
Mm-hmm.
was admiral of the Ulthwen fleet.
Aislinn or
That
Aisling.
sounds correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll need to brush up on my high elf lore there because I'm not as up to speed on them as some of the other factions. But that sounds great too.
What? You're not an expert? Come on now.
No, I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
more of a dwarf guy, chaos
That's
dwarf
fair.
specifically. So that was also a good night for me when they in 2024 GW released some new chaos dwarf sculpts. I was pretty pumped about those.
Are you gonna
I
try
like
to
how everyone
convert them
thought
into
they were
your
going to be
army?
for Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, like there's rumors, but no, those definitely look like Blood Bowl players. Yeah, and then what about the how did you feel about those releases last night, Andrew?
I mean, it's fine. Uh, it is interesting to see Empire coming next because at least based on like what other people are saying, they are one of those have-not armies. So they're kind of, I feel like, in the same place as dwarves pre their book. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get sort of brought in line with everything else. Because I feel like that new dwarf book really was like a good booster shot for that army, and they got a lot of nice toys and tools to, I guess, compete with some of the better armies. So it's going to be interesting to see, if Empire gets that same sort of lifeline back into the game. Although we did see, I guess, at CCBB, Empire performing pretty well. So maybe it's just list building as opposed to the army itself. But again, I'm pretty stoked about that. High elves, I mean, that's cool, I guess. I don't really care either way about that army, but again, it'll be interesting to see sort of where they go with their theme list to try to keep them, different from like their current play styles, but also like how that expands the story. Like, how are they going to move the high elves into this old world setting? And what story behind that? Because it's really hard to do high elves without dark elves, and currently they're a renegade faction. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I don't really have strong opinions one way or another, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough. But I think though most of the Arcane Journals have been pretty solid. I would say only Tomb Kings sort of left me lukewarm. But I think they have a pretty good track record with the other ones of like bringing different play styles and interesting new spins to the faction. I mean, arguably, Dwarves is not like a total reinvention of the faction with the two armies, but it's still different enough to breathe some life into the short folk there.
Yeah, for sure. And it wasn't like a big using the dwarf book as an example. It wasn't like a big retelling or like vastly different list than maybe what you would do before, but it took sort of like at least one archetype in terms of the all artillery list and like gave it a boost in play. So again, like it'll be neat to see what they do for Empire in that regard. Especially if like one of them is the rumored like Null army, like that's gonna be pretty crazy because Great Cannon's hurt.
Yeah. Juiced up Hellblaster volley guns. Like, ouch.
Yeah, no, thank you.
No, thank you. All right, cool. So that was most of the news. So let's slide into the main segment of the episode. So CCBB. So let's start with a bit of a TO's recap and perspective on how you thought, Andrew, the event was overall. Did you like it? Some highlights from your perspective, things you'd like to keep and stuff moving forward.
Yeah, so like generally, I think CCBB went pretty well. I have no real complaints or like there wasn't very big negatives. Like it was a very positive event. Everyone seemed to have a good time. There weren't any like super or contentious games or anything. Everyone seemed to just be happy to be there, rolling dice, pushing around their rank and flank blocks after X amount of years. It was really cool to see a lot of um, people that used to play in the past. So one of the guys, Tony Chastanet, he used to play way back. He brought a crew up from Vermont, so it was cool to see him again after like 10 years. and then a lot of other faces as well. Um, in terms of like running the event, it actually went pretty smooth. Again, a lot of planning events like this and like executing them is how much work you do beforehand to make sure it goes smoothly. So with Ryan and Danny's help, we had a good pack in place. And then we used all of our like RTTs leading up to that to sort of test the pack and like see if there's any areas in that we could have changed. So going into CCBB, I felt pretty confident that the pack would be good. There weren't any major BCP issues, which is what we use to track the tournament, other than a mistake on my part, but that wasn't because of BCP. That was me. I'll go over that in a minute. So for the most part, yeah, it's pretty positive. I did notice though on day 2 that I was getting a lot more weird and edge case rules questions. I don't know if that was just people were trying to tighten up their gameplay as we got into like the last few rounds and people were trying to jockey for that top spot, or just through random chance, like that's when all like the weird edge cases come up. So like there was like weird multi charges and sort of like if you couldn't close doors, like how do you nudge and stuff like that. Like just weird things that like in my games at least, and the games that like at the RTTs we've run, these things haven't really came up. So there was a lot of like me asking Danny McDonald, who is also one of like the local TOs, and Ryan about like at least conferring with them about like, well, how would this play? So for the most part, like we kind of, I feel like we made the best calls we could given information and maybe some of the vague rules writing in the book. So I'm not too worried about how that went. Other than that, like I don't know, it's pretty good. It's kind of nice to like after you put all these pieces in place, just to kind of like watch the event go and not run itself, but at least go like go through its course and see everyone like playing games and like all the terrain I made. Like it was nice to see those tables actually in action and people like enjoying using that stuff. Um, so yeah, for the most part, like it was great. The part I did mess up though was so we had our overall like best general award based on win loss draw first, and then your like battle points, your 20-0 score. But our best in factions were based on your 20-0 score, not your win loss draw. That was in the
Okay.
pack. That's something I missed when we did the awards. So when I got the list for awards, I kind of just went down the list, and for best forces of fantasy, this was the only one that got messed up. The Empire guy had the best win loss draw, and that's who we gave the award to at the event. But it actually was supposed to go to Shane Hall, the Bretonian player, who was one slot down from him on this like the win loss draw standings, and
Okay.
he had a higher battle point score. Luckily, neither of them had left, and the guy who won the Forces of Fantasy is also one of the event owners, the organizers. So he was cool with just like handing over this stuff to Shane, who rightfully won that award. And we made sure we got it to the right person. When I do my write up for the social media and stuff this week, I'll make sure to point that out and make sure that everyone knows that Shane Hall actually won the best Forces of Fantasy, not the Empire player, Jason.
Awesome. So good recap there. And then Ryan, on your end, how did you like? What were your overall thoughts on the event?
I think it went great. Like the room layout worked in the end, even though I know Andrew had some trouble when we wound up having to move to the smaller room. I think everything still fit fine, though I did wind up buying a cart to make my life easier. um, in that vein, like I had 6 great opponents. I had a ton of fun. All my games went well. Everything was like on time and organized. So yeah, I have no complaints as an attendee. Um, and yeah, we all learned some interesting things about the rules over the course of the weekend. But that happens in every game. So that's it for me.
Yeah, sure. And then, like, I agree with basically everything you said. From my perspective, like, the first thing is I want to thank Andrew and the whole Canhammer team for just putting this on. It was a really, really good event as far as I'm concerned. I enjoyed my time throughout, and everybody I spoke to enjoyed the event also, which is basically what you want, right? Like the proof is in the pudding that it was a good event at that point. So that's like that's fantastic. I had 6 great opponents, and we'll talk about our games after Ryan there. But the 6 people I played against were just fun people to hang out with. And then like the small things at CCBB, I think like add a lot of value compared to most of the other events I've attended. So having free bottles of water for all the attendees all weekend, having like a really solid convention level menu on and food on was just fantastic. The bar was great. Obviously, I'm always a big big enjoyer of that. And I thought the terrain was great. So, like, it's all positive for me. Really, one of the better events I've attended, and I think Andrew, you and the team could be super proud of what you put on there. It was fantastic.
Oh well, thank you. Like that's what we want to hear. Like we want people walking away happy. So, hearing that is really appreciated. I will say that we have already signed contracts for next year, so we will not be getting bumped out of the room again. We already have it locked in for the dates for both Capital City Bloodbath and Canhammer Team Tournament.
Nice. And will there be an old world event next year also?
For Capital City Bloodbath,
Yeah,
100%.
amazing.
And maybe at Canhammer Team Tournament, we might be looking at doing a teams format as well.
Ooh, the scoop's coming out already. Fuck, I thought we were gonna have a whole episode on this. We still will. We still will. But yeah, so we're
Well,
something.
I'll tease that. I'll tease that right now. It's not 100% set in stone, so we'll see where that goes. But we are talking about it.
Yeah, I am beyond excited for that. If it happens, that'll be fantastic. So I think Andrew, you kind of went through your TO's perspective in your comments there. So let's just skip to the sort of next part that we were going to discuss. And how do we feel about the podium, the overall representation of factions and placings at the tournament? Like, is that is the field at CCBB representative of the overall meta of the game, or yeah, how do we feel about placings and armies?
So watching, it was Phil, right, who came in first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Watching Phil finish all of his games in about an hour, I have this strong feeling that you could have given him any 90% good list and he probably would have been in the top 3 of the event anyway. So the fact that he just, you know, navigated himself into an incredibly strong combination of models just made it easier, if that makes sense. I guess what I'm saying is, like, I don't think the list carried the player through the event, but I think it definitely enabled him just speed running through everything. As to the top 2 of the event being double undead dragon nonsense, like that's the direction competitive play with minimal restrictions will go is towards aggressive stat checks, and it's really hard to kill a toughness 6 monster that regenerates wounds every turn, and then you have 2 of them.
Yeah.
And then they kill, and they have like +8 casting magic nonsense. So am I surprised that those things were at the top of the event? No. Am I surprised that only 2 people brought that to the event? Yes.
Yeah.
That's really my thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, I think you're I think you're right about for sure the list enabling the player but not carrying the player. I think a really like poignant example of that is, the top 2 lists were essentially were similar in construction, and it was the same army. And Phil, who won the event, took down the other player pretty handily. So it's not all list. Definitely, player skill had something to play um, in that one for sure. But yeah, Andrew, how did you feel about like the podium and the overall placings?
Well, first of all, just for our listeners, the 2 top lists, so first place and effectively second place, although we didn't do a second place award, were both Tomb King Double Dragon lists. So that's why we're talking about, the strength of those 2 models in that army. It's very hard for a lot of armies to deal with, if at all. And I think the only one that can probably do it like really well is the other undead army if they went scream heavy. I think that can deal with that list pretty effectively, but we didn't see that at the event. So they kind of took it away. I think it's it it's weird for me to see that happen because, again, as you said, like, I think Phil's a really good player to begin with, so it wasn't just like, oh, he took the best list and that's why he won. Like, no, he's a good player and then took a really strong list as well. So it's hard as a TO to be like, what do I do with this information now? Do I try to introduce some sort of comp, even though in the past I've been very vocal on not being a fan of comp? Or do I just let it go and maybe hope that it's less of a case of like, well, this stuff is absolutely broken and maybe it's just other players have to catch up. I guess the old adage, get good, but I don't think that's the case. I think these are very strong lists and maybe something might have to be done in the future. Um, Although I got a year to worry about that, so it's not a big deal. But maybe, that's something for GW and the rules team to step in, and with, their heavily rumored GT pack coming out, like maybe that's going to address some of this stuff. At least that's my hope. But really, it's like I don't want to take away these guys' wins. Like, they played really good. Yes, they had strong lists, but like their skill got them there. It wasn't just like, oh, I took like this crazy list and I don't want to take that away from those guys because they did play very well.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, other factions had play into them. At the end of the day, I think Phil had a tie on his last game against Bretonians. So I mean, it's not impossible to do something into them. I think. Like, I don't think the undead list, specifically Tomb Kings, because they're sort of the faction we're focusing on now, are overpowered or anything. I think it has to do, Andrew, is like what you mentioned in terms of players having to catch up is really on point because, in a kill point game, right? The factions that get to resurrect the points that they've lost obviously start with an advantage. And when you're fighting any other than those 2 armies, you can sort of throw damage around willy-nilly. And then, it'll sort of add up throughout 6 turns and you'll end up killing stuff. But that just doesn't work into Tomb Kings or Vampire counts in quite the same way. And I think you really need to come into those games with a solid game plan to be able to win them. And it's not like it's much harder to improvise. So I think a lot of it has to do to like is a skill, like a player skill thing, rather than simply like those models or those armies being overpowered. So yeah, I guess that's my take on that, and I will cover that more when we talk about our individual games because I did fight both those undead armies in the tournament. So yeah, and then circling back to sort of the representation and if the tournament was representative of the overall meta of the game. So a few things. I'm not overly surprised of with regards to the podium. I think again there were two strong lists at the top, and then I think, as I mentioned, two armies that you really have to think things through when you're going to fight. And so yeah, they start with an advantage on that front. Definitely not insurmountable, as we've seen, in other tournaments around the world. So there is that. I was really happy though to see quite a big representation across the event in terms of factions. I know a few were left out, but that's unfortunate for those guys. But like really good representation and really good overall list variety. And again, it just reinforced in my head that the game, it's not all about what the naysayers are saying online and all the doom and gloom. It's varied lists and a lot of different takes, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
No, I'll echo what Kevin's saying there. Like, out of 40 players, we had all but two factions represented, and no two lists were the same. Like, even the two Double Dragon Tomb King lists were
Right.
only similar insofar as they had two dragons.
Exactly. They were radically
Um,
different lists. Yeah.
Like, there were 4 Bretonian armies. They all looked very different. I played orcs 3 times. They were all very different. I will also raise, just on a philosophical point that both of you touched on, with the um, undead having an advantage in a game where you need to kill things, is a curiosity point's been raised across the internet and in discussions at Bloodbath on whether the differential system that was lifted out of the old teams play is the best metric. Like, obviously win loss draw is what was leading the day anyway, but whether the differential plays into points denying armies having an advantage over killing armies, versus, say, using the core rule book, major victory, minor victory draw criteria. But that's for a completely different episode.
Yeah, like massive can of worms there. Yeah, that's like I didn't know you were gonna run off into that direction. I have a lot of thoughts, but I would need to, on my end, for sure, like dive into that and have like a bit of a back and forth with myself to see where I land. Like, I guess my gut feeling initially, I like the points differential system a lot more than the major victory, minor victory draw, but I don't have the be all end all answer here, obviously.
I was just putting it out there.
Yeah, we could. Then that's like a super interesting subject to dive into at some future point. So yeah, let's talk about Ryan, you and me, about how our games went. And let's do a bit of a tactical after action review of our time at CCBB. So why don't you start us off with a quick recap of your list? I know you mentioned it like on the last episode there, but for new listeners.
Okay, so my army was Bretonian exiles. It was almost entirely cavalry, aside from the minimal amount of footbound things I was required to take. So we had a Baron on Royal Pegasus, with the Frontier Axe and some defensive buffs. Fairly durable character. We had an Outcast Wizard who was level 3 with Elementalism and an Arcane Familiar to get Demonology, and the Falcon Horn of Fredimund, the most vexatious item in the entire game. A Damsel on foot, level 1, with a Bound Fireball item. And then the remainder of the army was 2 units of 6 Knights of the Realm, 10 or 12 Peasant Archers, 2 units of 6 Mounted Yeomen, who I'm just going to shout out now, were like the all-stars of my entire army. 5 Pegasus Knights with a banner that allowed them to make a Vanguard move. 2 units of 5 Squires with Fire and Flee and Scouts. 2 Bretonian or Border Princes Bombards. 10 Border Princes Brigands with Blunderbusses. That's the letter B too many times. and they were ambushers, which was a mistake. And 5 questing knights, with the Paragon having the virtue of the impetuous knight, so they could have a nice 21-inch threat range on their charges. That's my army.
Nice. On my end, so I'll start with my overall performance. So I wanted my goal for the event was to go top legacy faction. Unfortunately, I came close, but I didn't quite make it. I finished second in terms of legacy factions. So there is that, and I went 4-2 for those who are wondering. But we'll cover that in detail. So in terms of a quick recap of my list, so I was taking my Chaos Dwarfs, my trademark Chaos Dwarfs. In terms of the general, I had a level 4 Sorcerer Prophet who was elementalism for this event. He was on a magic carpet and had the lore familiar to pick his spells. My second hero was a Black Orc War Boss on Wyvern, the one you see sort of everywhere with a great weapon, the Troll Hide Trousers, as well as the Amulet of 5+ word save. I had 2 Hobgoblin Khans on Great Wolves, one with a Ruby Ring of Ruin. Then in terms of my core, I had 2 units of 13 Infernal Guard with great weapons, drilled and shields, which I think are actually really solid units. I had a single tax unit of Black Orcs. I know not many people. I'm pretty privileged to say I can can take a tax unit of Black Orcs in my army, but I did. They're great weapons also. 5 models. Then in terms of the remainder of the army, I had 2 Iron Demons, which are really, really solid models, very difficult to shift. They put out some great shots, so I'm a big fan of those. And then I had a unit of 5 Hobgoblin Khans. Sorry, not Khans, but Hobgoblin Wolf Riders. Obviously on wolves. So that was the army on my end. So Ryan, why don't you give us a quick recap of your game 1?
Okay, so game 1, I played the aforementioned man who came up from Vermont. He had lizard men, and round 1 was open battle, if I remember.
Yeah.
So all in, it was a 9-11 loss for myself against the lizard men. However, it was an incredibly close game. I took out, so broad strokes of the event, or of the thing. He had 3 large dinosaurs and a Slann, some Temple Guard, and a few units of Skink Skirmishers, etc. I managed to take out all of the big dinosaurs, the Bastillodons and the Skink Priest on Carnosaur? Question mark. I don't know lizards.
Sure.
And
Small
the
dino on
Slann,
big dino.
the Slann got an interesting life lesson in damsels give units magical attacks, which makes peasant bowmen hilarious with 30-inch range magic arrows.
Yeah, and that thing doesn't have much of a save once you're through the ethereal.
Exactly. And so all in, it came down to, I think the difference in our scores was like 207 points off the top of my head. So it was a very, very close game of us just trading unit for unit. But as is typical to everything, Mounted Knights of the Realm charge in, promptly die. Meanwhile, unarmored mounted yeomen just kite around the entire board for the whole game and survive. That's really where it went for me.
Nice. Would you approach that game differently if you had to play it again, or?
I hard to say. Like, realistically, if I had maybe prioritized trying to take out the Slann earlier than I did. Now, that has to do a little bit with positioning and terrain placement as well.
Sure, yeah.
Like the points to win the game really hinged on either taking out the Slann or wiping out its Temple Guard. And I'm hard pressed to see how I could have accomplished that while still killing the monsters. Like the resources I had to accomplish everything were in use until they died, at all points during the game. Uh, the other thing that hurt me was I was a little aggressive with my Pegasus Knights, and I was down to one Pegasus Knight at the end of the game, so they gave up 25% of their points as well, and that's
Yeah.
just a big expensive unit. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess my take would be that a lot of high toughness monsters is a kind of a rough matchup for Bretonians from the get go. So yeah,
yes and no. Like one of the Bastiladons was just killed entirely by squires, just plinking it with arrows and
okay,
um like j- and a few like strange interactions to it. But the other one was just like run down by Pegasus Knights.
sure,
So
yeah, yeah.
uh,
The good old throw Pegasus Knights at every problem and sorts itself out.
correct.
Okay,
We'll see a lot more of that later.
yeah, sure, yeah, I know. um,
How
Yeah,
about
on
you?
my yeah, sure. On my end, so game one. Before I dive into talking about that, I've put a little bit of thought into how I sort of present these games and recap them. I think it's not super, and you didn't do that there, but like I think it's not super effective to go like turn by turn, play by play for people who are listening after the fact online, like in an audio medium. So I'm just going to focus on how I evaluate the board state for each game, what key elements I think I have to achieve to win, and how I was or was not able to execute that, and then points to improve in my play. So, with that being said, my first matchup was against Beastman. A fellow named Adam, just a really great opponent to play against. And this was the all chariots all the time type list of Beastmen, which I've played against before, so I sort of knew what I was getting into. Adam's list was basically 7 chariots of all varieties and flavors with characters and not. One level 4 caster, obviously Volatile and a Hagtree Fetish, which is like a staple in Beastman lists. A Gorgon, a single Gorgon, 2 units of Ungors, 1 ambushing, and a big block of ambushing Gors. So looking at that list in front of me, like I sort of evaluated the board state and came up with my plan there. There's 3 things I thought I needed to achieve to win the game. So number 1, I needed to deploy deep in my zone. There's 2 main reasons for that. So first thing is ambush on the Beastman side. It gets really annoying to have 20 plus double hand weapon Gors show up in your rear and rear charge you while you're fighting something else. Same thing for the Ungors. So I really didn't want to have to deal with that. So I deployed deeper. And then secondly, I needed to make sure, or as much as possible, that I started turn 1 36 inches away or more from the level 4 Volatile caster. 36 inches is 7-inch movement of the chair plus 7-inch marching on turn 1, 7-inch movement on turn 2, and then a 15-inch cast. And you'll tell me 36 inches is kind of hard to do with the deployment in open battle, but if you take it, basic mathematics and geometry has taught me that if you don't start head on in front of that model, you can actually make it work and then not face a Volatile until turn 3. Spoiler, it didn't actually quite work that way because of some magic, but it definitely helped. The second big part of the plan is, again, that level 4 Volatile caster, public enemy number 1. I need to kill it, at all costs, basically. So the plan was to shoot it with my Iron Demons because they're immune to the strength 1 hits of the Volatile, or ideally find a way to charge it with the Wyvern while not having it get Volatile. And then the third element to my plan was let the Beastmen come to me, basically. So Beastmen are a slow army. In general, I know they have movement shenanigans, obviously, but they're a pretty slow army. And I was quite happy to get 2 good rounds of shooting in while they were closing the gap. So yeah, that's how I approached the game from the get-go. And in terms of carrying out that plan, it worked out very well. So the deployment worked according to plan. I was able to deploy deep. There was a forest in the center of the board, which sort of made his advance even more awkward, and I managed to zone out the rear end of my deployment area for quite a while, so to prevent ambushers. So that was all great. I managed eventually to shoot down his level 4 caster on a chariot there by throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. So the Iron Demons, fireballs, wind blasts, name it. Like I threw everything at that thing and eventually killed it. It only managed to pull off one Vile Tide, which was great news for me. And then I really took advantage of the slow movement of the enemy army and the terrain. For instance, like through a mixture of deployment and stuff, the Gorgon and two of his chariots never really made it into the thick of the action, which definitely reduced like his killing power. In terms of highlights, two things that were sort of interesting. I had my Wyvern dive in to snipe his general, which started off really well. But I underestimated the ability of a Wargore to get juiced up on Gaze of the Gods. And he rolled like crazy sixes or whatever it is, like 3 turns in a row. And by the third round of that combat with the Wyvern, the Wargore was weapon skill 7, strength 8 or something with higher initiative than me, and had a pretty good shot at killing my Black Orc war boss. And then there was like just this incredibly Warhammer moment where the Wyvern's poisonous tail with always strikes first just hits him, procs, and the poison kills him basically when he had 1 wound remaining before he got to strike and finish off my Wyvern. So that was really cool. And then again, in terms of highlights, he failed his ambush rolls a few times when my backfield sort of cleared out. His Gores got into me though eventually in the rear, so they come onto the board. They turn 90 degrees to charge my Black Orcs that were on anti-ambush duty, and then they got pushed off the board by a wind blast, which was a pretty funny thing. In terms of so it was a strong win for the Chaos Dwarfs game 1. I executed the plan well, so I'm super happy with that. And the one mistake I made, I think, was declaring a challenge against the Wargore with my Wyvern. So he had a second chariot next to it, and I wanted to avoid fighting them both at once. My plan was to quickly kill his general and then move on to the other. And like as I mentioned, I didn't consider how juiced up that guy would get, which I get as a random chance there, but still. And if I hadn't declared that challenge, I could have had other units charge in to help. So, for instance, the Iron Demon was nearby, which could have sort of shifted things much quicker, and not relied on like the poisonous tail saving me just before the bell there at the end. So that was game 1 for me. Yeah, Ryan, you wanna jump in for your game 2?
Absolutely. So game 2 versus Orcs and Goblins. It was a Night Goblin themed army. So two bricks of Night Goblins, a unit of Squig Hoppers with some characters floating around adjacent to them, a unit of Squigs, 2 Doom Divers. I want to say there was a giant in there, but I could be wrong because I fought orcs 3 times.
Yeah,
They're
it was
all
2
blurring
Mangler
together.
Squigs. It was 2 Mangler Squigs.
There we go, with the Mangler Squigs. Yeah. Yes. I had great fun kiting things around with light cavalry. So that was another 9 to 11 loss on my part. So broad strokes of that game. I needed to, one, stop the Mangler Squigs from like running rampant through my army, which I did manage to succeed at. And then I needed to kill lots, but the problem was the vast majority of his army was worth nothing.
Yeah.
Like very, very cheap units. So I was throwing comparatively expensive units at cheap units, taking casualties to kill them, which is where the ultimate score wound up. Though my Brigands did come in turn 2, the only time they did in the entire tournament, and fight their way across the backfield, killing a Doom Diver catapult and doing some other miscellaneous nonsense. But overall, like, not an insanely it was a lovely game, but it was not an insanely eventful game. It was large brick of infantry, and triangle of cavalry smash into each other and fight. Pegasus Knights go on a murder spree, and some fun play with mounted yeomen and squires and their interaction with mangler squigs, trying to keep things complicated. But overall, it was a very straightforward game. Came down to another 200-ish point swing in score that could have been the difference in one more unit or one enemy character being destroyed type thing.
Yeah, how did you handle the fanatics?
So the first unit of Night Goblins was destroyed before the fanatics even had the ability to be released.
That's the best way to do it, yeah.
And the second unit of fanatics, so I learned a while ago that Pegasus Knights can actually kind of tank fanatics pretty well because they're 2 wounds each. So I managed to destroy another unit and overrun before I got close to that second unit of Night Goblins. So I'm toughness 4, 3 up armor save, and my ward save. So even when the fanatics did get into me, it didn't do a whole heck of a lot, and then that unit of goblins was also run down. I also think at least one of the fanatics ran into a forest and promptly died. So there was that.
Okay, nice. Good. So you'll hear about that list later because I played that the same opponent in game 3. But for my game 2, this is the one that I sort of been thinking about the most, and that has left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, not because of my opponent. Nick, who finished second in the event, was fantastic. It has nothing to do with him and has obviously everything to do with me and my play. So Nick was running, obviously, Tomb Kings, as we've mentioned. His list was composed of 2 level 4 casters on Bone Dragons, 2 Caskets of Souls, 8 Ushabti Great Bows, and a pair of Scorpions, essentially. So I thought I had a pretty good plan coming into the game against Tomb Kings, pardon me, and vampire counts for that matter, because the plans are sort of similar. And for sure that needs to be, you must kill the level 4 caster. When I face those kinds of armies, I tend to not waste any efforts trying to kill the core or the big units like the 40 zombies that you see, or the the resurrecting 8 Ushabtis that are just not going to die before they get to come back. So until that general's dead, focus on killing the single entities. And I thought the Wyvern was a key part of my plan because he's the sort of chaos dwarfs are not greatly endowed with fast-moving hammer units, and he's the one that I had. So he's kind of pivotal to the whole plan. So in terms of just spelling out the plan for the listeners, the 3 things that I looked at is firstly, looking at the army on the other side. I needed to find a way to charge my Wyvern into the level 4 priest on a dragon to kill it. I was most actually concerned about the Tomb King list, which eventually won the event before showing up. So I'd run a lot of Math Hammer on this matchup on my end, and I knew that my Wyvern could take him. So I was pretty confident if I could set up that matchup that things would slowly swing my way. Secondly, I wanted to make sure I could find a way to kill, or at least put some pressure on the Caskets of Souls early in the game. If you just let those things fire at you, it's going to just be a shitty day at the office, pardon my language. And then thirdly, I wanted to make sure, as I mentioned, I killed single entities. So that's obviously the Caskets and also the Scorpions until the level 4s were either locked up or dead, so that they just wouldn't resurrect the rest of his army. So that all sounds great, but things went very, very sideways right off the get-go. So the general of my army, the level 4 Sorcerer Prophet, is on a flying carpet, which means that he can't enter a unit to to protect himself, basically, which is terrible in this matchup because what happened is my opponent Nick went first. He managed to get the reserve move spell. There's a higher cast version of it for Tomb Kings also. Brought his dragon forward a bunch. Turn one, I sort of positioned a little bit on my end, and then turn two, he rolled successfully to bring a unit of 3 snakes that he had in from ambush. Then he made the they come from below or whatever it's called roll successfully, and turns out that with the reserve move was just within range of my caster. So start of turn two, we're like, I don't know, 15 minutes into the game, and the snakes pop up. They force the Chaos Dwarf to take 10 initiative tests and kill him on the spot several times over. So from then on, start of turn two, Nick is casting 12 spells a turn at 5+, which I cannot actually really dispel, which is, an uphill battle at that point. My Wyvern and my Iron Demons were unable to move or charge or do anything due to Miasmic Mirage and the Column of Crystal throughout the whole remainder of the game. So it was extremely uninteractive. I don't want to say it was a feels bad because I knew that this could happen and it's okay, but it definitely left me thinking after. So in terms of a result, I was unable to accomplish that plan. None of my important pieces can move effectively after my Sorcerer Prophet hit the dust there, and my opponent was very good at screening his flanks well and preventing me from pressuring the caskets with anything I had left. So it was a bit of a rough go. The mistake I made, so I've thought about this quite a bit, this game specifically, and as I mentioned, it wasn't a gotcha thing. I knew this could happen, and I think that at the end of the day, the mistake was not where my wizard was positioned, but where my whole army was positioned. Right, so I deployed too aggressively. I should have deployed much deeper in my zone, in my deployment area, given sort of what the scenario was like and the army I was facing. And the right play would definitely to have been to deploy outside of Casket of Souls range and play a defensive game. And worst case scenario, accept a draw. And because I deployed like that, even though there was a succession of rolls that had to happen, I shouldn't have left that up to chance. And had my caster not died so early, things would have been completely different. So I really, really, really wish I could play that game again. But I've learned something there. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? Train wreck of a game on my end?
I don't have anything to add that you haven't already observed, Andrew.
Why couldn't the model with the carpet join a unit?
Because the item has a stipulation that it cannot join a unit when you put it on, which works in most of my games, but not when I need to take 10 initiative tests.
It would seem I've been cheating for a while then, but all right.
Oops, that's fine.
Oops.
We'll cut that segment out when we put the episode together.
We'll edit that out. No, I mean that sucks losing your caster right away. Especially against an undead army, you need that magic, anti-magic and magic defense. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's not like you could have really done too much more to have prevented that from happening.
Yeah, and then and it was a bit of a rough go after, but I'm still proud of myself. I managed to save the vast majority of my army. I think he only killed 700 points at the end of it. Was enough for a significant win on his part because I just couldn't fight back. But yeah, it was what it was. So all right, rolling into game 3 there, Ryan.
So this was Mountain Pass against also orcs and goblins. This was a much more classic orc army. Brick of black orcs, brick of boar boys, brick of regular orcs. A wizard on a goblin shaman on a wolf, a giant, 2 bolt throwers, and some river trolls. So, being a Bretonian player, I massively fear bolt throwers because Kevin has ruined my life with them.
Yes.
And um, it turned into a lesson for. Sorry. Ultimately, this was a 10-10 draw. I think we had a point spread of like 115 points at the end of the game. And my opponent got an interesting lesson in player plays terrain and how it works. So Mountain Pass, we're playing, short edge across the table at each other, and he placed a hill in a very obvious, I want to build a fire base with my ballistas on it situation. Um, so I cut the table into 2 lanes with my terrain placement, basically building a line of sight blocking fence out of a forest and a house down the center of the table, and then almost completely refused the flank that his war machines had line of sight to. So it left a large portion of his army completely out of position to fight anything, but still had enough of my resources there to like stop them from just coming around and flanking me. And then left his black orcs, his boar boys, and his giant facing down the majority of my army. So it sounds like things would have gone well from that point. Like, you've
Yeah.
got boar boys, you've got black orcs, I've got 2 units of knights, a unit of Pegasus knights, my baron, and 2 cannons bearing down on these things. I get the first turn. I vanguard moved up my Pegasus knights with my baron. There's so much space in his backfield that my squires have started behind his entire army and are just like plinking away at stuff. I charge the boar boys, they countercharge. I proceed to roll nothing but 1s and 2s, do no wounds, lose 2/3 of my Pegasus knights in the first round of combat on the first turn.
Ouch.
Have them and my general flee from combat, escaping the boar boys. But end result involved the boar boys basically running through, destroying my cannons, eventually destroying my general, my Pegasus knights, and all of that. And then, another turn later, 2 lances of Knights of the Realm charge into a unit of Black Orcs, do 1 wound, and then like promptly die. um, so it it didn't go well on the front that had been set up to go well.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, where it did go well was my damsel and 12 archers killed a river troll who failed panic, ran through their wizard. They and the wizard then continued to flee for the rest of the game until they ran off the board. um, my questing knights with their 22-inch charge range fought a brick of orcs, killed them, and ran them off the table with some support from mounted yeomen. And by the end of the game, my questing knights and mounted yeomen, we had killed the giant. And my questing knights and mounted yeomen had run all the way to the bolt throwers, killed them, turned around, come back, and were re-engaging the brick of black orcs that was just kind of stuck in the middle of the table, while his boar boys, because of their overrun, never managed to get back into the game. Like they just ran into my backfield and were just kind of like stuck back there and couldn't make it back to anything. So as I said, we wound up with like 115 point spread at the end, mainly because that unit of boar boys was worth a ridiculous amount of points. But overall, like it was a good scrap, as the orcs would say, and it wound up playing out very well. It was just I lost very, very expensive things immediately to dice rolling, but that's Warhammer. Um, And yeah, no, it was an excellent game. Like top 5 games I've ever played, just in terms of how the game played out. So that was that one.
I'm impressed that it swung back so hard because you were off to quite a poor start there. So there's definitely that to it.
This is where I say mounted yeomen are the heroes of everything. Like those guys just getting those opportune flank charges or kiting units into weird directions or randomly shooting people with their short bows. It's just the Swiss Army knife of models.
Amazing.
How about your game 3?
All right, perfect. So for my game 3, I played into Orcs and Goblins, a fellow named George. The same army you played against, Ryan, I think in your game 2, the Squig army. It was a great game. He was a bit of a newer event attendee. So who was attending with like a highly thematic list rather than like some sort of high speed, low drag competitive army. So it turned into a pretty chill, laid back, collaborative game, which was cool. So George had a Night Goblin themed army, as Ryan mentioned earlier. 2 big units of goblins with fanatics, 2 manglers, a massive unit of squig hoppers and hopping characters along with them, a pair of doom divers, and then some regular squigs. So super thematic. Looking at his army, the plan I sort of came up with pretty quickly, having faced most of those things before, actually having faced all those things before, was like threefold. So firstly, I needed to find a way to handle the fanatics, like find a way to ensure that they were released in a manner which minimized the damage to my army. So that could either be by sort of hiding near terrain where they would die quickly, or not ending my movement within 12 at a minimum inches of a Night Goblin unit. A little bit further back is better even. Or pushing my Iron Demons ahead of my army, which is what I ended up doing, to bait out the Fanatics, because the Fanatics are, if you think Peg Knights can tank Fanatics, Iron Demons can tank Fanatics all day. So that was the first aspect. The second thing was I wanted to soften the squigs from a distance. So both Mangler Squigs and Squigs Hoppers are very scary on the charge, but they're also super brittle units that sort of fold pretty quickly to shooting. So I wanted to make sure I didn't let them get the charge. And then the third thing is I wanted to destroy the Doom Divers early in the match. They're a deceptively strong war machine, and I think probably everybody would agree the strongest rock lobber / catapult types war machine in the game. And they can hurt my Iron Demons and characters, so I needed to find a way to take care of them early. In terms of how that all played out, things went broadly according to plan. So I placed my Iron Demons out in front of my army, and I spread out my other units as much as possible to get the Fanatics to launch in a more or less useless manner. My opponent George, I think, saw through it, and he didn't exactly take the bite the bait. Sorry, but he did take a ton of damage coming in. The Manglers and a big unit of Squig Hoppers, which is most of the combat power of that army, didn't actually ever make it into combat. Frankly, it was kind of a hard matchup for him. The Iron Demons, those squigs were the perfect targets for Iron Demons, putting out a massive volume of shots at strength 5 into toughness 3s and 4s type situation. And then I think my opponent maybe respected my army a bit too much. And then because he didn't want to move forward to get charged, the game turned into this weird sort of Mexican standoff, in which we were firing at each other, which was definitely to the Chaos Dwarf's advantage because of the higher volume of shots, and then just the his inability to really damage my high toughness models at range, aside obviously from the Doom Divers. The result was a win for the Chaos Dwarfs. Frankly, the Night Goblin army never really managed to close the gap and I was able to peel away a pretty big chunk of that army. In terms of mistakes, there's just one. I played my Wyvern pretty poorly in this game, so I had him hidden sort of mid-board behind a forest that was blocking line of sight, obviously, and he was waiting for the goblins to sort of move forward so that he could charge them in the flank and do a ton of damage. But then they never sort of came forward, and when it became obvious, I should have pushed my Wyvern out to collect some more points than I did. In particular, he should have dove out to get rid of the Doom Divers, and I didn't really do that until it was too late to do it properly. So that was definitely a mistake on my part, but still a strong win for the Chaos Dwarfs. So I'm pretty happy. Over to you, Ryan, for Game 4.
Okay, Game 4 was meeting engagement with the modified version used by Capital City Bloodbath. So it was a 0-20 loss for myself against High Elves. It can only be described as Dragon ate my army. So my opponent had Prince on a dragon. I don't remember what type of dragon it was, but it was dragon. He had 15 Swordmasters of Hoeth, 20 Sea Guard, some Dragon Princes, and some Silver Helms, and an Archmage, and that was his. And another character on a Griffin, and that was his entire army. All in, I had my Pegasus Knights on the board at the beginning, but my Knights of the Realm, my questing Knights, were my 500 points in reserve. The unfortunate part on that end was my only ability to project force was the Pegasus Knights. They got trapped in a fight with the Lord on Griffin, which they ultimately lost, unfortunately. And again, it was I had the weight going into him, into this Griffin character, but I kept rolling 1s and 2s, which was not conducive to actually accomplishing anything. So that was not helpful. And then really after that, I had a unit of mounted yeomen flee from terror straight off the table, start of turn 1. And then from there, it was just a series of, I plink a model here or there. I got the moral victory. Squires charged a unit of Silver Helms, and a Squire killed a Silver Helm before promptly being killed himself. And that's that. There wasn't anything. It's not that there wasn't anything I could do. It's that all of the things I did do failed. And ultimately, my entire army was slaughtered savagely. So that was my Game 4. However, my opponent was lovely, so it was the most fun I've had dying in quite some time.
All right, sounds like a bit of a rough go there.
Yes.
Okay. So my Game 4 was into vampire counts and the infamous Screamer list. It wasn't the full Screamer. It was just 3 sources of Scream, so I'll say that. My opponent was Brett. It was a good game. He played it well. I think I played it well. Ultimately, he ended up winning, and I'll go over that. Mission, as Ryan mentioned, was meeting engagement, which matters, which is going to matter a lot here in terms of the game plan. So what Brett was bringing to the field was a single Mortis engine with the level 4 Master Necromancer or whatever on it, a pair of Banshees to scream, a big block of Graveguards with great weapons, like 20 plus, and then 2 big blocks of zombies that sort of became 40 zombies within, a few turns. He had a unit of ghouls also and a unit of Vargheists. So I've played into the Screamer list before, and as I mentioned earlier, with the Tomb Kings matchup, like the priority number one in this match is I must kill the Mortis engine. And then after that, everything sort of starts to roll my way. And I can't get caught up trying to do damage to Graveguard or zombies or whatever. That's just an exercise in futility until that Mortis engine is gone, or at the very least, stuck in combat. I knew that my Wyvern specifically was the model that needed to get the job done in terms of killing the Mortis engine. And if I can't get those two models to fight, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to win. So that was like priority number one. Secondly, as I mentioned, I wanted to make sure that I did not engage the large blocks of infantry until the Mortis engine was dead. And then once it is dead, you want to make sure you combine multiple units charging at once to maximize combat res, and then quickly reduce basically the big blocks of zombies or Graveguard or whatever. And then third things is screams. So Chaos Dwarves have a better than average resistance to screams because of the high leadership, but still I wanted to find a way to limit their impact as much as possible. So those are the three things: Mortis engine, not get caught up in the core units, and then figure out how to deal with the screams. So interestingly, things went exactly according to plan for me, except when they didn't, and I lost the game. So I think I deployed very well in this one, exactly as I intended. So I used some impassable terrain to funnel my army, my opponent's army, slowly shambling towards me in undead fashion. I prevented successfully his big blocks from engaging me for like the first 3 to 4 turns, depending on the unit, which was super, super good and helped out a lot. I had some anti-banshee tech I was packing, so I picked a spell called the Curse of Hashut, which I normally never take except for this matchup, because it lets me, it's a magic missile that lets you target specifically character units, regardless of any other rules that govern, targeting characters around other units, in units, etc., in combat or not, and forces them to take a toughness test. And if they fail it, they take a whole schwack of damage, which in the case of Banshees and their low toughness was really, really helpful. So that spell alone and the positioning of my casters sort of kept them away from the two Banshees, away from the center of the board, and led them to being mostly irrelevant. Well, actually completely irrelevant for the whole game. The one Banshee got caught up in a huge goose chase with 5 Black Orcs around the other side of the board and did nothing. And then the second Banshee was just irrelevant because of its positioning. So that was all good. My plan to keep the Wyvern safe in reserve worked out extremely well. So because of the mission, I put the Wyvern as part of my up to, I forget if it's 33 or 50%. I think it's 33% of my army in reserve. So I had the Wyvern hidden, and the goal was to track the Mortis engine's progress across the board. Bring the Wyvern in at the right spot at the right time to be able to charge the Mortis engine next turn. I managed to accomplish this again well. On turn 3, my Wyvern came in. He was in a position to pull off a 13-inch charge on the exposed flank of the Mortis engine and sort of see everything hopefully start to crumble my way. For those who are not aware, a Wyvern is a 9-inch fly move, so I needed to show 4 on 3 dice, including Swift Stride. And unfortunately, I failed that charge. So the Wyvern rolled a 1-2 on the charge roll and a 1 on the Swift Stride. So moved forward 3 inches. That sort of made the game, that shifted the game significantly. My opponent pulled the Mortis engine way back, where I wasn't able to charge it until turn 5. And that threw my whole plan out the window. So the result was a win for the vampire accounts. And this is a case of I managed to do everything I wanted to do and then still failed to bring it all together at the end. And you know what? Even though it was a loss, I'm still super happy that I played to plan and I accomplished sort of everything I set out to do. And sometimes Warhammer things will happen and you'll roll that 1 and 2 on the charge and there's not much else you can do about it. And that game was much closer than the final score would sort of indicate as a result. In terms of mistakes, I'm happy with how I lost this game. I didn't make any massive mistakes. The one thing I would change, I made, it was game 4 in the same day. I was starting to be a little bit, loosey goosey with how I was playing at the end there. So I made a bit of a deployment error. So with meeting engagement, this is hard to explain on an audio means, but with meeting engagement, cutting the board at a 45-degree angle. There is a side of your deployment zone where your reinforcements have a shorter distance to travel when they come in to reach sort of the battle. And unfortunately, I deployed mostly on the wrong half of my deployment zone, which in the end didn't make a huge difference because the enemy came to me. But considering my game plan and the speed of my army, it would have been like tactically more sound to choose the other half of my deployment zone. But in the end, that mistake is absolutely not what lost me the game. And it goes back to what I was saying before we got into those matches with regards to undead armies being something you need to plan to play into very well. And then, missing that charge with the one tool I had to sort of deal with that is what ended up costing me the match. So it was a big win for Vampire Counts on that one. Yeah. Any thoughts on that one, Andrew, Ryan?
No.
All right. Okay, cool. Ryan, you want to jump into game 5?
Game 5, day 2. We were playing Capture Control, which is a slightly modified version of the Wizard's Tower. We're using a hill as an arcane monolith in lieu of a tower in the center of the table. I was paired into a very thematic savage orc army. So large unit of savage orcs, large unit of boar boys, a smaller unit of boar boys, a unit of goblin wolf riders, some doom divers, a giant black orc boss on a chariot, another chariot. I think that was it. And we were squared off against each other, and I went for, as cavalry is wont to do, I went for the aggressive play, and I vanguard moved the Pegasus Knights 10 inches forward out of my deployment zone onto the hill in the center of the table, squarely facing his big unit of Savage Orcs. I won the roll-off to go first, charged the Savage Orcs, promptly massacred them with my Pegasus Knights and my Baron because they only had 6-up ward saves. And then they fled from combat. I pursued, thus running them down. And this put my unit of Pegasus Knights behind the frontage of his entire army, which meant he was unable to respond to the Pegasus Knights with anything else in his army. Ultimately, what wound up happening was he started pivoting units in his deployment zone. My Pegasus Knights, instead of engaging with them, just went off in the opposite direction to go kill a war machine and run down goblin wolf riders and things like that. Although his goblins did make a good show on my flank, running through a unit of squires and eventually taking out one of my bombards. And ultimately, the Pegasus Knights were able to clean up what would be my left flank, turn around, come back, and get back in the fight while the rest of my army engaged his Black Orc boss, his other chariot, and his giant. I found over the course of fighting all of these giants that they turned out to be relatively easy to kill by kiting them at the maximum edge of their charge range with squires or mounted yeomen, and using fire and flee on charges that they'll wind up being forced to fail to just plink wounds off of them. That was fun. This was also the point in the event where I just forgot my ambushers existed and just stopped rolling for them for the remainder of the event. So it was fine. Ultimately, at the end of the game, I had the majority of my army intact, and my opponent had 1 wound left on his Black Orc Warboss chariot as the only wound remaining on the only model left in his entire army. Bringing a 17-3 victory for the exiled cavalry.
So pretty solid showing there. I think going back to sort of what you were saying, like something I want to highlight for people listening in is I think that moment where your Peg Knights roll in at the start of the game, turn 1, kill the Savage Orc block, and then opponent turns around and starts pivoting everything inwards to fight them, basically to charge and fight them, is sort of a pivotal moment. And it goes back to something I see a lot happening in my games, at least, and you guys can comment on if it's the same for you, but I feel that as players we often tunnel vision on the charge and closing that gap, and then I think what certainly just listening to it, Ryan, made a huge impact on you winning that match was so convincingly was instead of taking that fight and tunnel visioning on those charges, you just walked away from it. You just moved away, and then your opponent was probably left tripping over himself in his deployment zone, trying to turn around, reform, and reface units to actually carry on with the game, turn 2 onwards.
Well, and even in doing that, in pivoting the Boar Boys to attempt to go after the Pegasus Knights, he broadsided the Boar Boy unit to my cannon.
Yeah.
Yes. And so things just started to fall apart from there. And additionally, like, orcs, I love them. They're very cool. But at the same time, toughness 4 and a 6-up ward save does not durability make. So it was excellent in terms of theme, but like some of these orc units were losing combat to like strength 3 unarmored mounted yeomen who were just like stabbing them in the eyes. So
yeah, striking first because of the charge, higher initiative movement, and then just wiping them. Yeah,
exactly. That was my game 5.
Awesome. Glad to see the Exiles pull a really resounding victory. So game 5 also turned into a bit of a resounding one for me. So I played into Frank and his Empire army. His army was a pair of Griffins, 2 level 4 mages, 1 on Griffin and 1 on a regular horse mount. He had all of the Empire Knights, a unit of demigriffs, and then 2 Hellblaster volley guns with some chaff cavalry, essentially, and archers. And I knew from the get-go that this was going to be a very favorable matchup for my Chaos Dwarfs. And I knew Frank, so I told him from the start, I'm like, this is going to be a favorable match for me. Essentially, and I'll touch more on my final game with regards to how Chaos Dwarfs work, but a toughness 3 army with generally low strength, low volume of attacks is just exactly what I want to face. Specifically, not having any great cannons in the Empire side was a godsend, and is really the thing that concerns me in that army when I face it. So in the end, though, like Frank, I get along super well with him. It was a really chill and collaborative game. We used early on, we sort of knew what the outcome would be, I think, and we just ended up working together to just sort of improve and stuff. And we ended up timing ourselves out because we took it a little bit too relaxed, frankly. So, anyways, thinking about sort of how I was going to tackle the game, there's 3 things that came to the front. So, first one was Don't let the Hellblasters shoot at my infantry or support units. Hellblaster volley guns with an engineer beside them are very potent. They put out, obviously, a metric ton of shots. I needed to make sure that that wasn't shooting into my T4 infantry or, God forbid, my hobgoblins. Secondly, I needed actually I knew that my Wyvern could bully the knight units very effectively. So low model count, low toughness units that are worth a lot of points is exactly the kind of target for a Black Orc war boss on Wyvern. So from the get go, I put him on a flank, which I don't usually do, and I just let him do his thing all game. Thirdly, in terms of my plan, I wanted to use my Iron Demons to just mow down all of the toughness 3 chaff and cavalry units, which, spoiler, they were able to accomplish. So what I will say in Frank's defense, though, 100%, is things looked pretty grim for him on the at the outset of the match. The Iron Demons began picking up units every time they shot, and I positioned my army to keep it safe from the volley guns during deployment, which worked out very well. And then my opponent was faced with a decision to either sort of pull back and play defensive in the face of the sort of how the match was shaping out to go, or just go all out with his cav and take some losses on the way in, but try to claw back some points. And I think he correctly chose the latter of the two options, and it definitely made the game competitive again. In the sort of mid-game portion of the match, I was able to swing the Wyvern onto a flank and just start rolling up Knights units. They didn't have much of an answer either to stop my chaff from harassing them, and I sort of ran roughshod and was annoying through the backline of his army. Interestingly, ultimately, he managed to kill an Iron Demon with a Griffin, which I was kind of surprised and wasn't expecting was going to happen, but didn't super alter the course of the match. I had my second Iron Demon charge a unit of Demigriff Knights, and he decided to flee, which was probably the right move, but then rolled like an enormously long flee roll, like 6 and 6 on the basically on the Swift Stride, which ended up panicking all his artillery and his engineer, and then just cascading failures from then on, and sort of sealed the outcome of the game. So he was extremely unlucky on that one. So that's sort of how things rolled. It was a solid, although he gave a solid response in terms of the choices and stuff, and he actually won quite a few combats with his largest block of knights into my Infernal Guard. And he was also super, really well utilizing his Illusion Caster to limit the impact of my Wyvern in the second half of the game. Like, despite that, I think it was always going to be an uphill battle for Frank. And the Chaos Dwarves took the day. In terms of just points to improve or mistakes on my end, I think I sort of did what I did in game 1 and against that Wargore, and I didn't properly assess the potential of the Empire Captain on Griffin. I didn't expect him to have the damage output that he did, and I probably would have responded a little bit differently if I had. I was sort of happy to let him go waste the match fighting an Iron Demon, but that's not how things worked out, and he did manage to kill it, so that was some poor planning on my end. That was my game 5. Back to you, Ryan. Sorry?
Was that the first Iron Demon kill of the tournament?
It wasn't. I lost 2 Iron Demons in the tournament. The Vampire Counts player, after I failed that charge and sort of things crumbled for me, managed to kill one of the 2 Iron Demons.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, they're like, you need to be packing some specialty tools to kill those things. Over to you, Ryan, to close it out with game 6.
Yes, so game 6, I played into Wood Elves. We were playing open battle again. This was the army that wound up winning Best Painted, which I apologize for not recognizing at the time. I am cripplingly red-green colorblind, so a green army, no matter how well painted, is just like incredibly difficult for me to look at. So I felt bad when I found out afterwards they had won Best Painted. But but like it all looked very nice. It was very cool. And I'd never played Wood Elves before, so this was interesting. I can definitely summarize it by saying that the whole like I'm cagey and nimble and dance away from you playstyle doesn't work when your opponent only gives you 1/4 of the table to play the game in.
Yeah.
So what wound up happening was, so he had a lord on a stag and a wizard of some sort on a griffin, I believe it was, or some kind of bird creature. He had a unit of Glade Guard, a unit of Glade Riders, 2 units of Deepwood Scouts, unit of Way Watchers, the Way Stalker, the like sniper archer character, 3 Eagle or Warhawk Riders, and 2 units of 3 Treekin. And so, in placing our terrain, he made sure the center of the table was filled with forests, and then did the Wood Elf thing and spawned yet another forest in between those forests. And he filled up so much of his deployment zone that my scouts weren't really able to go anywhere useful. He vanguarded his Deepwood Scouts, or scouted his Deepwood Scouts forward into those woods. I did what I've consistently done, and I vanguarded my Pegasus Knights up the center of the table under cover of the trees, won the roll-off to go first, and promptly charged his Deepwood Scouts, regardless of the fact that they were in a forest, which is apparently something he was not expecting anyone to do, because apparently people have a fear of dangerous terrain tests. And so, momentum was achieved at that point where my yeomen were pushing up the flanks, kind of holding down the mobile battle with his Warhawk Riders and his Glade Guard, and then eventually the Treekin. The Pegasus Knights just like powered through this unit of Deepwood Scouts, came out the other side of the woods, wound up in combat with on subsequent turn with the Glade Lord, some Treekin, and a unit I had entirely forgotten, Wild Riders, which they ultimately won, destroying the Wild Riders, taking out most of the Treekin and the Glade Lord. And like the game just kind of continued from there. I did lose both of my units of Knights of the Realm to some archery shenanigans, because I just had no real room to maneuver them other than the lane he was able to shoot through. But yes, between the Pegasus Knights, the questing knights, and the mounted yeomen, we managed to dismantle a large amount of the army, trapping them behind their own wood line in about half of their deployment zone, and thus taking away their ability to do things like use evasive without fear of running off the table, or even reserve moves. Couldn't reserve move anywhere because my army was completely surrounding him. So ultimately, it wound up being a 13-7 victory because of the casualties that I took. But it was just speed and violence against these elves.
Yeah, and I think he sort of ran out of runway there in terms of pulling back his army into a tiny corner of the board and then just not being able to use his mobility at all to fight you.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it turns out that in a stand-up fight against Peg Knights, Wood Elves are at a loss. Who would have guessed?
Like, not gonna lie, Armor of Meteoric Iron and the Virtue of Purity combined, just giving me a 5-up save on a Toughness 5 monster horse was just fantastic throughout the entire event.
Yeah, that would do it definitely. Specifically in this kind of matchup where there's not a lot of high strength attacks either.
Correct.
Okay, so rolling into my last game, I was quite pleased, and I got treated to a Chaos Dwarf mirror match to close out the event against Peter, who'd come up from Boston. Super fun, engaged, and positive players. So I really enjoyed the match. We had two very different lists rolling into this. So Peter brought a level 4 Sorcerer Prophet on a Lamassu, a single Iron Demon, two Death Shriekers, two Death Shrieker rocket launchers, a big unit of Bull Centaurs, and then a pair of big units of Infernal Guard. One was Hand Weapon and Shield, and the other one was Blunderbuss. Frankly, I felt pretty confident going into this game. So slide aside, Chaos Dwarves are at their core a high toughness, leadership, armor skew list with limited damage output. And we can talk about that at length in another episode if the listeners are interested. But I've played the mirror match 3 times now, and in my experience, at least, considering what I just mentioned, whoever techs harder into toughness wins the matchup. And in this case, I was the tougher army, so that led me to be pretty confident rolling into the match. My plan was, once again, like all good plans, had 3 elements. So first things first, I wanted to kill the Lamassu. It's a big chunk of points that's fairly easy to kill. If possible, get my Wyvern into combat with it because that thing will wreck the Lamassu. Or otherwise shoot it with Iron Demons because statistically speaking, that should probably do the job too. Second part of my plan was ignore his Iron Demon. My chances of killing it were actually quite limited unless I wanted to go for a massive play and risk the Wyvern and everything, which I didn't want to. I just wanted to focus on juicier targets and rack up points there instead, and then play a points denial game, which Chaos Dwarfs are pretty good at. And then the third thing was I needed to prevent the Death Shriekers from having unimpeded shots into my Wyvern or my Iron Demons. I've played Death Shriekers a ton. They're extremely swingy, but I also don't want to tempt fate and get a lucky hit on my Wyvern and then a massive roll on the D6 damage roll that could sort of almost cost me the model. So I definitely didn't want to do that. Despite my confidence, it turned out to be a very tight match, however. Peter played a very strong positional game. I think he correctly saw the threats I was pushing across the table towards them, and he was able to maneuver his Lamassu very effectively to prevent it from getting charged by my Black Orc. He also won the chaff game, and which resulted in my Hobgoblins not doing much for the entire game. And in the end, I only managed to kill a unit of Infernal Dwarves. 1 second, pardon me. Sorry, a unit of Infernal Guard and the Death Shriekers while he killed some chaff. And then, sorry, we were neck and neck in points after that mark. We ended up finishing the game with 500 points killed on my side and 300 points killed on his. Which led to a very minor 11-9 win for me. In terms of executing my plan, I was unable to charge the Lamassu and kill it. My opponent was really effective at maneuvering it around my big units. I shot at it a bunch with my Iron Demons for 3 turns and basically whiffed everything. So that was unsuccessful also. I did successfully managed to position my army in a way that the Death Shriekers, the Bull Centaurs, and his Iron Demon were basically irrelevant throughout most of the game. Through maneuvering and positioning there, those 3 units, which were essentially all of his damage output, managed to collectively kill a 80 unit point of Black Orcs of mine. So that was a great success. The result, as I mentioned, was a good game and a tight win for me. I made 2 mistakes, I think, in this game. So the first thing was I wasn't aggressive enough, knowing that I sort of had the upper hand in the matchup from a toughness perspective, especially my Iron Demons. I could have utilized more aggressively and better than I did. And then secondly, it was game 6. and I was starting to play like sloppily by the end of it. 6 games in 24 hours is about as much Warhammer as I can manage, I think. And I lost a bunch of chaff that I shouldn't have. Best example is my con on Wolf. He was, with the ruby ring, he came close to some hobgoblins on his end, and the sneaky gets, and I decided, I was like, sure, they can move and shoot me, but whatever, we'll see what comes of it. And that was just some sloppy play, because obviously they did manage to kill it, and there was no reason for me to give him those 100 points essentially. So yeah, that was definitely another mistake, which I'll attribute to my weak constitution. So that was me in game 6, and that wrapped up the tournament for both of us. Closing it out for me, at least, with a 4-2 record, which I'm a little bit disappointed at, but still super happy with how everything went. Any final comments on your run there, Ryan?
No, all of my games were very good, and my 2 of my losses and my draw were, mere dice rolls away from being 11-9 in the opposite direction. So all in, like, even though it was 2 wins, 1 draw, and 3 losses, all the games were so tight that I don't feel like I got, steamrolled in my losses or anything like that.
How close did you guys come to your initial goals and predictions for the events? I know we had mentioned it last podcast, but I kind of forget what you guys were hoping to achieve.
You want to take that first, Ryan?
Yeah. So I was, if we call a draw halfway between a win and a loss, I was 1.5 wins away from my my ultimate goal. So my goal was to achieve Kevin's record of 4-2. So I was, two games away from that, but again, not disappointed by that. So
fair enough. And then on my end, I came very close to my goal. So I wanted to go top legacy faction. I finished second legacy faction, and I had the same record as Brett, who ended up going first in that regard with his vampire counts. We both had 4-2. And I just came in second on the legacy side on a battle points thing, which he definitely earned on his end, and he beat me on the way there. So congrats to him. And so, yeah, Andrew, I came close, but not close enough.
Close. Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So overall, super happy with the tournament. Super happy with my run. I think, Ryan, you're much the same. And yeah. Yeah, again, we both had a blast. I really enjoyed it, so that was all good. So time to wrap up the episode now. Sorry, Andrew, that was a lot of me and Ryan there at the end with the game recaps. But overall, I hope everybody, our listeners, enjoyed it. And anybody want to tease the subject for the next episode?
There might be an 8-pointed star involved.
Yeah, there will be. You could have given a bit more of a teaser. That's fine. So we're gonna be talking about Warriors of Chaos next episode, the Grand Army, as we prepare for the Arcane Journal. So episode 3 will be Grand Army. Episode 4 should be Arcane Journal. So any closing remarks, Andrew, on your end?
No. Just looking forward to improving on the event next year. Hopefully we can see a lot of the same faces, if not all of them, back for the event, and maybe we'll see how much we can grow. I'll have to make some more terrain, but maybe we can bump it up to 50 or 60 players next time around.
Amazing. I'd love that. What about you, Ryan? Any closing comments?
No, again, thank you to Andrew and the team he's involved with for putting on the event. And I look forward to sharing my gazpacho temperature takes on Warriors of Chaos next time.
Awesome. Yeah, not much more to say on my end. I think we've gone on long enough. Thanks again to Andrew and the whole Canhammer team for putting on an amazing event for us. And yeah, talk to you all again soon to talk some Warriors of Chaos. Thank you and good night.
Bye.